All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of history's absolute most notorious legends. We're going to unpack the startling and honestly incredible truth behind a 3,000-year-old pharaoh's revenge. It's a massive story. We've got ancient tombs, literally unimaginable wealth, a media frenzy that completely gripped the globe, and of course, a series of bizarre deaths that absolutely defied explanation. So, let's start right at the very warning that terrified the whole world. I mean, picture this. You're standing before a sealed tomb in the middle of the Egyptian desert, completely untouched for 3 millennia, and you're met with this chilling prophecy. Death shall come on swift wings to whoever disturbs the peace of the pharaoh. That is exactly what the newspapers claimed was inscribed right there at the entrance. You know, you disturb the sleeping king and death is going to fly right at you. Now, fast forward just a bit to 1:55 a.m. on April 5th, 1923. We're inside Cairo's Continental Hotel. Lord Carnarvon, he's the millionaire sponsor of the whole expedition, is writhing in bed, dying of this really severe fever. And get this, at the exact moment he takes his final breath, the entire Cairo power grid inexplicably fails. The whole city just plunges into darkness. And as if that's not crazy enough, thousands of miles away back in England, Carnarvon's pet dog suddenly begins howling and then immediately drops dead. Part 1. The Phantom Curse Awakens. So to really understand how this bizarre chain of events actually kicked off, we need to backtrack just a little bit. Because before the curse, there was just pure desperation. You see, British archaeologist Howard Carter had been scraping through the Valley of the Kings for years. His wealthy sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, had already sunk roughly 15 years and the modern equivalent of millions of dollars into this with absolutely zero results to show for it. The funding was completely exhausted. This was Carter's literal last chance. Then, boom. November 4, 1922, they strike stone steps. And by November 26, they've breached a sealed door bearing the royal seal of Anubis, the god of the afterlife. Carter makes this tiny hole, peers through by just the flickering light of a candle, and famously declares he sees wonderful things. And man, the reality was just staggering. Inside that tomb lay 5,398 ancient, pristine objects. It was, without a doubt, the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. The hoard contained this absurd, almost incomprehensible level of wealth. I mean, we're talking about a 10-kilogram solid gold death mask, a literal dagger forged from meteorite iron, and an entire solid gold coffin. But tucked away among all those glittering treasures was something kind of curious. 130 walking sticks. Now, definitely keep those in mind, because they're going to become incredibly important later on in our story. But almost immediately after that tomb was opened, the omen started. First off, Carter's golden canary, which he kept in a cage at his house, was shockingly eaten by a royal cobra, literally the ancient symbol of Egyptian royalty. As you can imagine, this bizarre event sparked absolute sheer panic among the local workers. Then, Lord Carnarvon accidentally slices open a mosquito bite while shaving, which leads to a really nasty infection. And to make things even more terrifying, just 12 days before his death, a popular novelist named Marie Corelli actually published a letter warning that anyone intruding on a sealed tomb would face dire, magical punishment. Part 2. Fueling the media frenzy. So, with an ancient warning and a freshly dead billionaire, the press took these eerie coincidences and just completely ran wild. The body count started climbing fast, and the newspapers were practically keeping a live scoreboard. George J. Gould, a big American financier, visits the tomb and then dies of a fever the very next day. The radiologist who x-rayed the mummy died suddenly. Carnarvon's secretary, Richard Bethel, dies of a blood clot, and when his 78-year-old father, Lord Westbury, heard the news, he tragically jumped from his 7th-floor apartment. It was chaos. By 1929, 22 people connected to the tomb had died. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, you know, the brilliant mind behind Sherlock Holmes, publicly stated he believed an evil elemental was at work here. But here is the thing that truly cemented the terror for the public. In 1926, during an autopsy of the mummy, doctors reportedly found a circular scar right on the pharaoh's cheek, and it was located in the exact same spot where that fatal mosquito had bitten Lord Carnarvon. This was it. This was the peak of the mystery. After that, the world was utterly, completely convinced. The curse of King Tut was undeniably real. Part 3. The tragic reality of Tutankhamun. Okay, so to actually understand this curse, we have to pivot away from all the ghost stories and look at the clinical, hard science of who this boy king actually was. See, the media portrayed Tutankhamun as this powerful, vengeful god king, but the reality, he was just a frail 19-year-old boy. Thanks to generations of extreme royal inbreeding, he suffered from a severe clubfoot, Kohler's disease, which is a really painful bone disorder, and severe malaria. Hey, remember those 130 walking sticks we mentioned earlier? Yeah, they weren't just ceremonial. The poor kid literally couldn't walk a single step without immense pain and physical support. So this majestic conqueror was, in reality, a deeply tragic figure who barely even survived his teens. Part 4. Debunking the deadly myth. It is time to systematically dismantle this whole curse using science, logic, and good old-fashioned journalistic reality. Let's kick things off with that terrifying swift wings curse. Well, it never existed. Like, at all. There was no ancient clay tablet. Decades later, Richard Adamson, who was the tomb's security guard, finally confessed what actually happened. A desperate reporter had asked him about these rumors of a curse. Adamson didn't even confirm it, he just simply smiled silently. And honestly, that one smile was literally all the journalists needed to invent the terrifying tablet, completely out of thin air, just to sell more newspapers. Okay, but what about the fevers? What about the actual deaths? Well, in 1963, Dr. Ezzeddin Taha from Cairo University discovered that a lot of these archaeologists were actually just suffering from Aspergillus niger. It's this highly resilient fungus that can survive for millennia in dark, enclosed spaces, like ancient tombs. When you inhale it, it causes severe respiratory inflammation. But here's the catch. It is entirely treatable with basic antibiotics. And what about the math? Does the statistical body count actually hold up under scrutiny? Well, in 2002, the British Medical Journal finally ran the numbers. They compared 25 Westerners who physically went inside the tomb with 19 who were in Egypt but never exposed to it. The result? The average age of death for both groups was exactly 73 years. In fact, investigator James Randi pointed out that the quote-unquote cursed individuals actually lived slightly longer than the average life expectancy for their social class at the time. Basically, the curse was mathematically improving their lifespans. No way, right? Let's just keep tearing down these completely fabricated headlines. Remember the Cairo power grid failing? Turns out that was a totally normal, everyday occurrence in the 1920s. What about the howling dog dying at the exact same time? Well, when you actually factor in the time zone difference between Cairo and England, there was a 4-hour gap. And that chilling scar on the mummy perfectly matching Carnarvon's bite? Pure fake news. It was completely invented by the Morning Post newspaper, simply because their biggest rival, the Times, had the exclusive rights to the real tomb updates. The dark irony of all this is just incredible. I mean, Lord Carnarvon was already chronically ill. He was literally only in Egypt because his lungs couldn't handle the harsh British winter. And remember, penicillin didn't even exist yet in 1923. Getting an infected mosquito bite was very often a death sentence back then. But you want the best irony of all? Arthur Weigel, the reporter who practically invented and heavily promoted the curse for the Daily Mail, actually died of a sudden fever in Egypt. Meanwhile, Dr. Taha, the very man who successfully debunked the curse using fungus science, died in a sudden car crash right after his press conference. I mean, you can't write this stuff. Part 5. The True Immortality. Let's look at what actually happened to the man sitting at the very center of all of this. Think about it. If the curse were real, target number 1 absolutely should have been Howard Carter. He was the guy who found the steps, breached the door, physically opened the sarcophagus, and pulled the mummy out with his own hands. Yet, Carter lived for 16 more years after the discovery. He finally passed away from totally natural causes at the age of 64. And for those entire 16 years, relentless journalists would constantly track him down, just badgering him about the deadly curse of the pharaohs, asking him how on earth he was surviving it. And Carter's blunt, completely iconic response to the press was always simply, "I am still alive." So, what should we really take away from all this? Well, the ancient Egyptians lived by a very specific, beautiful philosophy. A person only truly dies when their name is forgotten. Tutankhamun was an unimportant, sickly boy king. His successors actively tried to erase him from the historical records. And honestly, they succeeded. He was genuinely forgotten for 3,000 years. But because a security guard smiled at a reporter and the media decided to invent a sensational, deadly curse, Tutankhamun became the single most famous pharaoh to ever live. The media's fake curse didn't actually kill anyone, but ironically, it gave this forgotten boy king the exact thing he was looking for all along: true, lasting immortality. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you're scrolling and you read a viral, sensational headline, ask yourself, what is the real story hiding just beneath the surface?